Well, look, the music plays by random. It is wholly inappropriate, although we may be talking about something that could be a little devilish today when it
There
comes
you
to your
go.
health.
Sinister.
Yes.
That's what we're.
Dr. Jonathan Tripp joining us in studio. It's Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine this half hour on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you as well, answering the telephones. And we should point out, too, there's a great slogan they have: life's too short not to feel good. And today that really also applies to what we'll be talking about because we're all walking around. Not only do we have TV screens, which most of us grew up with, then we got computer screens. Now we've got telephone screens. People are walking around with pads. And we're not talking about the old legal pads. So we're constantly checking these things or looking over them. And we think about this as mainly being an affliction of the young, but you were just telling me off air that's not always the case.
It's not just the teenagers or the infants. We're going to talk about the the pros and cons of screen time, and so that screen time can be we think of TV, we think of computers, but especially what is the most where we've developed to is where a lot of us are holding in our hand all the time our phones, which is a constant interruption. But it's an addiction too that we get to where somebody texts us and we can't leave that text alone. It's, well, I need to know what it is or I need to respond, and the answer is, in an emergency, yes, that's true, but the truth is it's more of a new cultural tradition that you must respond immediately to a text, even if it interrupts everything else that's going on in your life.
I didn't think I had issues with this until I had a thought a couple of weeks ago. And on my cell phone, when I get an email, I get a quick notification of it. And I don't generally pay a lot of attention. But an old girlfriend of mine, who we've remained friends for the last 30 some years,
Uh-huh.
we keep in some periodic discussion, via email. That's about it. But um, her initials for her Yahoo account match also a news site that sends me email. So when I see that SL on I immediately open it up, and it often is not from her. But I'm excited because I think in the beginning it is from her. Open it up, and it's actually just a news website that I'm looking at.
So it's a disappointing
It
experience.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. Um, Let me talk a little bit. I gave the title today as Screen Time: Improving or Deteriorating Our Brains. So that's the question. And we're going to talk about a lot of the infant to 5-year-old group. So, those of you out there with kids or grandkids, this is important stuff because initially we usually try to use screens, TV, whatnot, for developmental things where, it's not purely entertainment, but they definitely mix the two. And so the feeling is well, I'm teaching my child, basic matching of shapes or alphabet, how to recognize things, to distinguish between different animals and their sounds. We had a really fun experience. We got about an 18-month-old young lady that's one of actually our staff's children, but a patient as well, and we were having fun with her, conflicting the animals with the sounds because she started out with everything ended it had the sound of moo.
Yes.
So the puppy, the cow, the duck, everything was moo. And so we started having fun. And my mother-in-law, can you imagine this, a grandparent doing this when our children were little, just really went out of her way to try to confuse our children onto what animal sounds were which. So, developmental, I don't know,
Wasn't
some
this the whole point of the see and say was to correct that?
exactly straighten out those grandparents. So she had a blast doing that. She'd laugh like crazy. But what's really interesting, I guess, is we believe that the children are learning and learning well, even as little kids. And what the evidence shows is that the two-dimensional screen learning does not translate to the three-dimensional real life scenario. And so that's probably the single biggest thing I can come out with to talk about the infants is saying if you're trying to do developmental learning education for your children, the old hands-on blocks, magnets, things that the children could touch, feel, move, really do better. In fact, let me just read this. This is a study by Oxford University in coordination with the Canadian Pediatric Society. And it says infants and toddlers have difficulty transferring new learning from a two-dimensional representation to a three-dimensional object, from screen to real life is what they're talking about, and are unlikely to learn from TV at this age. By contrast, they learn intensely through face to face interaction with parents and caregivers. Early learning is easier, more enriching, and developmentally more efficient when experienced live, interactively, in real time and space, and with real people. Now, that's coming from a pretty substantial, you know, educational institution. So I think that's really helpful to say, we're fooling ourselves by saying, oh, because I have, uh, I'll pick one, Dora Dora the Explorer, which is now a 10-year-old idea, or something else that my child is really growing and developing in an efficient manner while I don't have to even, while I'm occupying them. And the answer is it's not as good. So,
We've got more coming up with Dr. Jonathan Tripp in just a moment. He's joining us from Tripp Family Medicine. Better health with Tripp Family Medicine. It's 8:40. We're at 24, but it won't stay cold very long today. Joining us in studio, Dr. Jonathan Tripp from Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls, Idaho. We're at 8:41 and it's 25. Bill Colley answering the telephones, and that number would be 208-736-0300. If you've got kids, you may have a question or two about how much time they're spending in front of all these screens. We've also got to ask the doctor, too, if people looking to get in touch with you because your office is always looking for new patients,
you
and we should point out it's easy to find.
You bet. Our office is on Fillmore Street on the north side of town by the post office. And so our phone number there is 208-933-4400. That's 208-933-4400. And people often ask, are you taking new patients? The answer is yes, we are. And some things that people don't really know because most offices, I don't think, make room for same day appointments. If you're hurt or you're sick, call us. We have 3 to 4 providers a day available, and we keep open spots for people that are sick that day. And I will warn you that call early in the day. Don't wait till
Right.
4 p.m. to try to get there. But so we do our best to accommodate same day or next day if you're sick or you're hurt. So let's see. Website is tripfamilymedicine.com. And actually, I went back looking at our website not too long ago, and there's a lot of good information there, not only about us, but about things that are good for you. And then you can always interact with us on Facebook at Tripp Family Medicine. So those are some good ones. Let me give a quick announcement because we have about a year ago, well, actually not quite a year ago, it was last April, we kicked off the reintroduction of cosmetic treatments at our practice. And this is something we've done all along. In fact, for 5 years in the Phoenix area, that was all I did was cosmetic related skin treatments and cleanup and laser hair removal. I don't have the lasers, at least not yet, but we've got some really fun things. And then to get people introduced to that, we have a peel party that we've done several times, and our next one is going to be March 14th. So that's a week from today, and it's at 7 p.m. There is a cost to get in because you're going to end up with about $300 worth of treatments, and so we're asking people to pay $100 to be there. If you bring friends, there is a way to get in for free, but you got to bring at least 3 friends.
You sold these out, though, before, so this is
We
not an
have,
issue.
yeah, and this one we're about half full right now, and typically how they go is the last few days they just fill right up. So if you want in on this, or if you want your wife in on it, or you want to go with some friends, which is always actually more fun because there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of interaction, you learn a ton, and you have some fun treatments on the hands and on the face, and nothing that people are gonna shriek in horror the next day and say, "What did you do?" It won't be anything crazy, but all things that make a difference. And so call our office again. That's 933-4400, and let them know you want to be in on the peel party, and we'll get you hooked up and have fun next Wednesday.
I want to point out it's 8:44 and we're at 25. Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. We were talking earlier about screen time, and we're talking all these screens that we have available: TV screens, telephone screens, computer screens. And, we've been around now long enough with all of these devices that we're starting to finally actually see the research come in. For a long time, we simply didn't know what the impact was,
Yeah.
but it's been around, at least the computer screens now, for 30 some years. we can start to see patterns develop.
You bet. And in fact, that was the statement of this uh, study that I was reading from Oxford, and that is until recently, we really had a lot of opinions, but we didn't have a lot of actual research that helped us say, hey, is this evidence based or is this opinion? And so, because people have their opinions about, hey, the devices are awesome. My dad was an early adopter of technology from even in the 60s. He was working for IBM and, about, oh, I think it was about 1990, this is before the advent of, serious cell phones. He predicted that you'd be able to have a computer, that you would be handheld, that would have access to whatever you needed to do anywhere you were. And he didn't know what Wi-Fi was or anything like that, but he made those predictions. And the only thing that he missed is he didn't understand that it would also be your phone. And so, this is the father I grew up with, very excited about where technology was going and very hopeful. And so when I look at it, I don't really say, it's the evil uh, empire that is, trying to take us over. However, when you look at what's in that cell phone, cameras and things that are constantly scanning, there is a lot of Big Brother in your cell phone.
Yeah.
With your cell phone, we know where you are. We can in a way know what you're doing, and it actually is listening to your voice all the time to see if you want to command Siri or whoever else, Google, to do something. So you can change those settings. You can kind of shut that off to some degree, but there is some conspiracy worries about what we're doing with our cell phones. I love the fact that I can be driving anywhere and look at traffic because everybody else's cell phone is being tracked, and they can tell how fast they're going, and that's what lets me know if I'm getting into bad traffic. So there's a lot
And
of good.
I never even knew that that existed until I started. I'd be sitting at home and I'd get these traffic alerts that would pop up on the phone, and it would say moderate or high or normal, and I had no idea it was even there.
Yeah, it's not a camera. It's using everybody's phones to track the flow of traffic. I love that if I'm traveling and especially going through a major city, trying to figure out where we're going to get stopped and can we get around it. So I love the facility of the technology. Now, but specifically about screen time, where we get hooked on our social media, where we're watching movies, we're watching YouTube videos. There's a lot of great, good things there. I mean, I'm a physician, not an auto mechanic, but thanks to YouTube and a manual, I was able to change the alternator and the water pump and the serpentine belt on my Honda, a weekend or two ago, and it actually works. My daughter's been driving it for a week. So there's a lot of good, but as we look at it and say, well, what's it doing to our brain as we just continue to surf? And the answer is it is changing your ability to think, and it is a draw or an addiction, however you want to say that your brain wants more of that stimulus. We know this is true with attention deficit related, you know, kids and adults, that they are driven or drawn by uh, lots of uh, brain stimulus, and so screen time does that. So it becomes harder and harder to walk away from it. But that's true for all of us. And what we're finding is mental health changes depending on how much screen time you're actually doing. So there are some limits that are guided and suggested. And for any of the preteen group, the suggestion is 1 hour or less per day of total screen time.
There's a concern, I guess, that too, that it's harming our ability to be critical thinkers. And the other one I heard was that people don't understand things like wit any longer because that actually requires some of that critical thinking. You got to move beyond the linear.
Well, it is because I don't know the real answer to the wit because I'm not that witty. I have bad
Ditto.
I have bad humor that my father transported to me or whatever. Um, so, but as far as critical thinking, and I'm sounding like the older folks when I say our children have no idea how to research anything other than Google it. And Google is great as far as being able to look at things. But if it's something outside of Google, it doesn't exist according to them. It must not be. And therefore, your ability to be a critical thinker really goes back to a lot of learning from books. And yes, you can read those books online, but the interaction in our education of being able to dissect and critique and what's being said here and what's being inferred and what's real and what's opinion, those are all very hard to overcome if you're simply reading, surfing. As a physician, I see this all the time when people come in and say, I've had these symptoms and I Googled it, and or I've read about this remedy, and I have 13 sources that say that if I eat this or drink this, it'll cure this. And my one critical thinking response is, tell me about what the source is. What are those sources? Are they reputable sources or are they somebody's opinion? Well, this guy says he's a doctor. Well, okay. I'm unimpressed with that title. I'm a doctor. And I'll tell you that there's a lot of people that claim doctor status that have no certificate behind that name. So be careful where you're taking your resource or your information from. But let me get back to teens, especially. Teens, the recommended time to limit screen time is 2 hours a day or less. If you take their phone away, they will still get close to 2 hours on TV or computer time. And that is, 2 hours is a very short time, because they're constantly going back and forth texting. And I'm not saying just teens. I have a lady who's 65 that I've treated with steroid injections to her thumbs twice in about a year because she texts so much. So she's got basically a joint arthritis and tendonitis because she's texting. So it's not just the teens. But what they find is, in general, about 1 in 5 teens have some anxiety or depression issues. And those issues go way up with more screen time. So the more they're surfing, the more they're hanging out on Instagram or uh, Facebook or whatever their choice of social media is, they're not learning. They're actually falling into more anxiety, more depression. And the perception is, especially when you look at any of the social media, you're seeing the best, most extravagant, most exciting parts of somebody's life. And so as you read that about 10 different people or 20 different people, you're seeing a fake reality of everything should always be big, fantastic, and exciting. And so your life stinks, and it plays into this whole anxiety or depression that, my life is a waste, but everybody else has awesome stuff going on.
You talk though about if you take the device away from a child. I know a lot of people who've talked about it's a little bit like taking cigarettes away from a nicotine addict, and the reaction is almost the same.
Yes, no, in fact, Tantrum City, if it's anybody, I was going to say an infant 5-year-old, but the truth is, if you took your phone away from most adults, you'd see tantrums big time. So it is something that you have to, shall we say, discuss. Now, it's true, your 2-year-old, you're not going to have a counsel about how to do screen time, but I think if you really approach the benefits of the social improvement or social advantages of somebody who doesn't use as much screen time, or the emotional advantages. So I'm saying your kid will actually be smarter if they get away from screen time. Your kid will be more socially adept. Your child or a teenager will be more emotionally stable if you get them off of screen time. And
You,
that that it's so, the kids will say, no, 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 everybody does this. Well, the truth is everybody is doing it. And if you want to be above the crowd, you got to do something different.
can you take a call?
Sure.
We have a caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Dr. Tripp.
Yes, sir. I'm just wanted to express my concern about myself in that my memory has deteriorated, I think, as a result of having these devices. I know in my past, I was in the military. I knew the phone number of all of my subordinates. I knew more addresses, locations of establishments. All of this I could recite from memory with no problem. Today, without my phone, I don't know any numbers, hardly my own, locations, addresses. I think that's actually harming me insofar as recollection of facts, whereas I guess there's no longer a necessity for that. And I don't. I guess I need to go away from the phone to try and regain that.
Yeah,
Well said.
appreciate the call. And I appreciate the thoughts because I, like you, had vast numbers of phone numbers memorized because that was what was more convenient or more. It was better for me than to try to go to a phone book somewhere, a list of contacts. If I just had it in my brain, it was a lot easier. But that action of memorizing, whether it's phone numbers, poetry, uh, you name it, verses of scripture, anything like that would be beautiful for stimulating your brain to avoid memory loss troubles. So it is an activity. You're creating synapses, which is more brain connections. You're creating pathways that are not being used when you're simply using your device. So I would encourage, that's one of the things you can do to combat the, shall we say, degradation of your mental capacity, is you actually find things to memorize. And, it doesn't have to be addresses and phone numbers. It can be something that you want to have in your brain. But it is true. The more you memorize, the more your brain is functioning in a way that is more alert and more responsive. So I agree with the caller on that one 100%.
And you hate to say it, but all of those people we sometimes picked on who live off the grid up in Idaho or boundary counties and Bonner County, uh, they may actually be better at all of this memorization, critical thinking because they're not dealing with all of this.
Well, I don't know that they're actually better, but I know that we lose some of that capacity if we're not uh, doing things that stimulate the brain in a different way. We're getting brain stimulation by screen time, no question, but it's entertainment primarily. In fact, we start out trying to provide screen time to our kids that's educational. If we go way back to the days of Sesame Street, that's what that was supposed to be about. And the truth is I joke about Sesame Street. I say I learned everything I needed to know about dermatology by watching Sesame Street because they talk about one of these things is not like the other. So that's not quite true. There's a little
You learn
more.
a little bit about cookies
There's
too.
there's a, yeah, cookies for sure. So I mean, we start with education, but it becomes more and more only entertainment. It is connectivity. It is uh, some organization of our world, but the truth is most of what we do on our screens is purely entertainment.
Hmm.
And what's really interesting is, Orson Welles' 1984, talking about how Big Brother would just take us all over and control us all. There was an opposing view written at the same time, I think in the 50s. And it was really funny. It was in the 1980s that there was uh, shall we say, a scientific article written, university level written, that showed that this opposing author, and I wish I had the name off the top of my head. Maybe I've done too much screen time. I can't remember. Um, but the article in the 80s said, we have entertained ourselves into oblivion. And that's the way that this other author said, it's not going to be Big Brother controlling us. We are going to give away our rights, give away our freedoms, give away our lives because we're so busy entertaining ourselves to death.
Quickly, contact information at Tripp Family Medicine.
Yeah, Tripp Family Medicine. The website's trippfamilymedicine.com. Phone number 208 933 4400. And Facebook at Tripp Family Medicine. And if you're interested in getting into our fun cosmetic side with the Peel Party, that's next Wednesday, the 14th at 7 p.m. But you got to sign up and you got to pay $100 ahead of time because it's going to be a big deal.
We want to thank the doctor. And just keep in mind, too, when you're on North Fillmore Street this time of year, unlike last year in February and March, it does not look like craters of the moon.
That's
So
right. Yeah, we don't have the snow piles or everything.
we've got one more hour of top story just ahead following the news at 9 o'clock from Fox.